second, and I need to stop the speaker of another computer in this room. Just a
Okay.
minute. Just live now. Dong, can you check the live stream to see if it's on air already?
It's out now, yeah.
Yeah, I can see people are checking in our session. Yeah, let's start. Good morning, our presenters and participants. Welcome to the virtual VietTESOL International Convention 2020. On behalf of the organizing committee, we would like to thank you so much for your participation and contribution to our yearly convention success. We are Hương Nguyễn and Tùng Vũ as the presentation's moderators. We are absolutely happy to see all of you in the light of virtual presence today, especially in this keynote speech. We highly hope that all of you will be able to have some valuable knowledge and experience as takeaways following the talk. Before the presentation, there are a few considerations. In case you have any questions or concerns about the presentation, please feel free to leave them in the comment section on the right of the screen so that we can gather the questions for easy response in the 5 to 10 minute Q&A session. We gladly welcome Dr. Mary Shepherd Wong in this 15-minute keynote speech, which is entitled Enhancing English Teaching by Optimizing the Use of Vietnamese in K-12 Classrooms Using Action Research. About our presenter, Dr. Mary Shepherd Wong is a two-time Fulbright scholar and principal investigator of 2 grants commissioned by the Hong Kong Government's Education Bureau to evaluate the native English teacher schemes in Hong Kong primary and secondary schools. She has conducted 145 presentations and has several publications, including 3 edited books and a 4th edited volume. She has also published an ESL textbook with Cambridge University Press. She has developed and led 4 study abroad programs in Thailand and Myanmar. Her publications and research include the issues for non-native English language speaking teachers, peace building, and gender inequality in education, reform in teacher education in Myanmar, action research, professional development, and the intersection of spirituality or religion in the English and the English language teaching. She holds a doctorate in international and intercultural education, master degrees in East Asian languages and cultures, and teaching English to speakers of other languages. She is professor in the Global Studies, Sociology, and TESOL department at Azusa Pacific University in Southern California, where she directs the field-based TESOL program and currently serves as the interim associate dean of the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences for graduate programs and research. She has taught ESL and been in teacher education for over 40 years in the US, China, Thailand, and Myanmar. Please welcome Dr. Mary Shepherd Wong.
Thank you so much. That was a long introduction. Sorry about that. All right. All right, let me start my presentation. Let's get right into it. I first, can you see me there in the corner? I think I'm not pinned.
Yes.
Can you guys pin me?
I pinned your video already.
Okay, good, great. Thank you so much. All right, I can't see myself, but I'm sure they can see me. That's great. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. I'm so excited to be here. I want to thank the VietTESOL committee for all their help, my two moderators here today, and the whole team, as well as the US Department of State for their support. I am currently the English language specialist for Vietnam. So it's been a real exciting time. And we're looking at using translanguaging in the Vietnamese classroom. So I've been asked to give this talk. I'm very excited about it. So let's go ahead and get started. So translanguaging, wow, the benefits of translanguaging to teachers are immense. If teachers use principal and strategic use of the L1 and the L2 classroom, it can have a lot of different benefits. It can enhance student learning, right? It can improve motivation, and it can also help with positive identity formation. So it's a very, has a lot of potential to it. Translanguaging pedagogies, they acknowledge and they draw upon the full language repertoire that students bring to the classroom. And it supports not only their language learning, but their identity formation. You know, if you were in an art class and your art teacher said, okay, pencils only, that would be a very strange art class, wouldn't it? Monolingual restrictions are like giving your students just a pencil in an art class, and you're withholding all of these other resources. No paints, no watercolors, just pencils only. So as teachers, we want to use everything we can to try to support and draw upon the language, what the students bring to the classroom, right? We still want to maximize the exposure to English. That is still a very important goal in English language teaching, right? If you're teaching an English class, you want your students to hear English and speak English. That's very true. But a parallel goal is to also optimize the strategic use of Vietnamese. Notice I said strategic. You want to think about why and when and how you're using it, right? So the question then becomes, how do we raise and heighten teachers' language awareness of their use of the L1 in the L2 classroom? In the case of Vietnam, the use of Vietnamese in the English classroom. And how can it be strategically applied with robust reasoning? Robust reasoning simply means teachers are able to articulate or state, right, what it is, why they did what they did. They can tell you, yes, I decided to speak Vietnamese to the student right here because I saw they were confused. My quick use of Vietnamese made them calm and enabled them to move on to the next thing we were working on, something like that. So in this talk, after defining and providing a brief rationale for translanguaging, I'm going to discuss how action research can be used to explore the best ways to use translanguaging in the classroom. I'm going to talk a little bit about the head, the heart, and the hand. The head simply means the theoretical lens. Why are we even using translanguaging? Aren't we supposed to not use Vietnamese in the English classroom? So we're going to explore that just a little bit. And also the heart. We're going to see how translanguaging actually can have a social justice bent to it, because we are acknowledging and we're respecting the languages that students bring to the classroom. Instead of no Vietnamese, it's like, be proud of your Vietnamese and use it to support your learning, right? The last thing is the hand, to know what you're doing, to believe in it and the ideology and the theory behind it, right? But also to know how to use it. That's the pedagogical approach. So that's what I hope to briefly cover in our time today. And then I'm going to talk briefly about action research, right? And action research, it's the process of systematically collecting and analyzing data in multiple cycles to respond to a particular question you might have in the classroom. It puts the teacher at the center of the inquiry. The teacher gets to be an active agent in the process of discovering, right, and applying new ways of teaching and learning to better meet the needs of their students. You know, I think that action research is an ideal tool to empower teachers to move beyond being teacher machines, to use adaptive expertise to transform student learning. This was taken from some of your documents in Vietnam about what English teachers should do. And to have adaptive expertise means you have to be thinking about what you're doing and reflecting upon it and analyzing it and collecting data, right? So the objective of this session will be to outline ways that you can explore how you might avoid too much, too little, and most of all, the unexamined use of L1 in the L2 classroom, and how you can leverage the use of students' entire language repertoires to support their learning and their identity formation. Thirdly, I'm going to talk a little bit about researching translanguaging, right? There have been a lot of studies on translanguaging and a lot on action research, but there haven't been a lot of studies of action research written by teachers, right? And done by teachers that explore translanguaging practices. So this is a gap in the literature. We're always looking for a gap in the literature. It provides a rich opportunity to use action research because it allows teachers to see for themselves the impact it can have on their student learning and on the students' identities. Teachers can tinker with it and tweak it so that it has the most potential in their classroom to improve learning. To find out how translanguaging can improve your students' language learning, we need to consider, first of all, as I said, the head. What is translanguaging? And do you really buy into it? Do you embrace it? Maybe you just tolerate it, or maybe you reject it. It's usually not one or the other. We're usually on the continuum. And I'm hoping through action research, you might see more of the benefits of it. And then the heart. You know, translanguaging, it's not just a bunch of methods, really. It's not just a bunch of strategies and techniques. It's more than that. It's actually kind of a stance, a belief that my students' identity in their L1 and their first culture is very important. That I'm not trying to make my students sound like an American or sound like someone from the UK. They're going to sound like they're Vietnamese speakers. They're Asian speakers of English. We're teaching English as a lingua franca in Southeast Asia because it's mostly Asian people speaking to other Asian people. That they can be understood, but they have an accent that's maybe unique to them. So that's the heart. And then of course the hand. How can you apply a translanguaging approach in your classroom, and how can you assess it to make sure it's actually working? So that was just an overview. Let's get down into the nitty-gritty here. So part 1, translanguaging. And you'll see I have some photos in my PowerPoint, and these are children in Myanmar. I don't have photos of children in Vietnam. I hope to later. Maybe I can come and we'll take care of that. So translanguaging pedagogies, as I said, it acknowledges the full language repertoire of students, and you want to use every to scaffold their learning and improve their learning and support them. And if it means drawing upon their ability to write in Vietnamese or perhaps even speak in Vietnamese, that is just fine, right? And it also supports, as I said, social justice goals. Suresh Kanagaraja states that communication is a shuttling between languages. It's a negotiation of very diverse linguistic resources we have for very situated construction of meaning. Reminds us that translingual practices, they're not new. In fact, they take place all the time in translingual communities. And it's our tasks as teachers to understand, to affirm, and to develop these resources to better support our teachers. Vogel and Garcia, they note that translanguaging privileges bilingual performances and not just monolingual ones. And pedagogies, it leverages the fluid languaging of learners in ways that deepens their engagement. It deepens their comprehension of complex content and texts. It develops both the named languages that are the object of bilingual education, in this case, Vietnamese and English, because it considers them on a horizontal continua, right, as part of the learner's linguistic repertoire, rather than just separate compartments in a hierarchical relationship. It's not English is up here and your home language is down here, but it's like these languages don't really have, you know, strict boundaries. It's kind of fluid boundaries. Teachers do not need to assume that they have to teach translanguaging to their students because students might already be using them. But teachers need to know how to tap into the dispositions of their students and explore ways to scaffold them for future development. Kanagaraja states this in his 2013 book. You know, there's often called two different types of translanguaging activities that teachers use. One is spontaneous. Spontaneous means, of course, it just happens by itself. A student doesn't understand something and you lean over and maybe you use the student's home language to explain it, to encourage him. And then you break into English. And then maybe in the project, they use both English and the home language and photos from both, all to support their language learning, right? That would be spontaneous. Because the spontaneous in the fact that you're just speaking it right on the spot. Another type is planned translanguaging, and this requires a more systematic planning, right? You have to have a knowledge of what languages are the students able to speak in and write in? What languages are they confident in? You also want to understand the structure of the different languages, how they're similar and how they're different. So you can maybe use that understanding to help them understand how the two languages differ. Let me give you some examples. This is Sarah Vogel in this photo here. You know, she states that our students have the gift of bilingualism. She calls it a gift. She said, and their lives are enriched when they're able to use all of their languages critically, reflectively, intentionally, and creatively. And that's called translanguaging. To break that down, critically means you're thinking, what language would better support learning here? Reflectively means after the fact, you're thinking, could that have been done differently? Intentionally means you're thinking, you're planning to use languages in certain contexts. It's intentional, it's not just an accident. And creatively, maybe in new and exciting ways, right? Examples of a translanguaging approach is when we ask our students, and we want to call them not English language learners, because that's kind of a deficit model. They don't really know English, that's their deficit. But if you call them emergent bilinguals, you're recognizing they already come with a language like Vietnamese and they're learning another one such as English, right? So what would be a translanguaging approach? Maybe you ask them to write a journal and you ask them to use English for the structures they have been taught. However, they can use their home language to express new and complex ideas. You know, this can be done even when the teacher doesn't understand the language, right? The teacher can use other students to, hey, help me. What is the student saying here? I don't know Spanish, right? Right. So this view regards that all languages that students bring to the classroom as very valuable resources to leverage and to support student learning. You can see in the bubble there that teacher is saying students use home language to express complex ideas. So getting another translanguaging activity that I really like is creating a cultural linguistic portrait. And you can see this is a portrait that the child has made, and you're using colors and captions indicating what percent they use different languages. When it's what percent they use at home, the languages at home. For example, in this example, English is blue and red is Spanish. So maybe they speak both Spanish and English at home, so their lips are blue and red. You also think, what languages do you read in? So look at their eyes. Their eyes are both blue and red because they can read in both languages. Yeah. And what languages do you write in? Maybe they can write in both languages. So they'll have red or blue, or maybe they only write in English. So it's just blue. And then the heart. What languages or what cultures do they have a strong affinity to? And hopefully there's both in there too. But this helps to get students and the teacher more aware of how students feel about the different languages and their emerging identity, right? That's being created. Another translingual approach, it uses culturally relevant materials. Think of a graphic novel with a character from the student's culture. The example here is The Monkey King. Maybe you have students from China. So you read a graphic novel of The Monkey King. And maybe the task is they are to write their own graphic novel, right? And they can be their own superhero and they can use English as much as they want, or you can encourage them to also use their home language if they'd like to for more complex ideas that they don't know how to express in English yet. So now we're going to change gears. You know a little bit about translanguaging. Let's talk a little bit about action research. So what is action research? Well, it's the systematic inquiry by teachers with the goal of improving their teaching practices, right? So notice it's a systematic, right? This next one says that you plan, you act, you observe, you reflect, but you have to do so more carefully and more systematically and more rigorously than one usually does in everyday life. You know, I asked a group of Vietnamese teachers the other day, do you know what action research is? And have you ever done it? And a few of them said, oh yeah, we do it every day. And I was thinking, you do it every day? Wow, that would be quite rigorous because it's usually a lot more work than what you would typically do as a teacher every day. And we'll explain that a little bit more. What I was happy to hear them say is that when they said we do it every day, I think they were saying we are reflective practitioners. We reflect upon our teaching. And that is a very good place to start as an action researcher. So action research is research done by teachers for teachers, right? It often can bridge the gap between theory and practice because you're actually trying out something in your classroom that you heard theoretically should work, right? And you're assessing and you're trying to improve your teaching practices because the end goal is to improve your students' learning, isn't it? You know, a key to action research are these cycles, right? I teach an action research class. I'll be teaching it this spring. And I require that my students have at least 3 cycles in their action research, because action research isn't just giving your students a survey and analyzing the survey and saying, yep, this theory works or this teaching method works. That's not action research. You have to go through a series of cycles. Let's take the graphic novel as our example. Let's say in cycle 1, you say, I want to see what goes on when my students are asked to write a graphic novel. I am going to keep a teacher's log of everything I do and think about what's going on, because I have to record as a researcher what I'm doing. And I'm going to ask the students to also keep a journal, a simple journal, what they liked every day, what they didn't like every day, and maybe what they think could be improved about the class, what would make learning more enjoyable to them. I might even ask them to reflect on their use of Vietnamese and English in the classroom, and when they use it and when they don't, and what they think about it. So I have the teacher's log and I have the student journals, and you're doing a graphic novel, and I take the action. The action is do the graphic novels and write your journal, and then I collect the journals and I have my log and I collect their graphic novels, and I find out they're so simplistic. They used only English. I'm not liking this. So I'm going to go back next week and I'm going to say, good start on those graphic novels, but this time I'm going to allow you to use Vietnamese when you like, to express more complex ideas. And they do that, and they journal about it, and you write in your log about it, and you write what you found out. And they're so much more complex. They're so much better, and you're thrilled. But some of the parents call you on the phone. They don't like the fact that they're using Vietnamese in their homework. And so then you have to think, how can I include the parents in what I'm doing so they're on board and will support this new method that I'm using? And you can see how the cycle is going to continue, and you will do more things where you need to collect data though. You need to collect data, and you need to analyze the data and make a new plan and tweak it until you're satisfied. All right, so you can see you do some planning, acting, collecting, and reflecting, right? The inquiry is speculating. Why is this happening the way it does? You have to put it into a question, specify what you're researching into a question so that you can investigate it. And then you do something in the classroom. It's action research. So you have to take action. And then you have to collect data. You need data. You have to have data, right? And then you have to collect it in a very disciplined and systematic way, because if you're just collecting garbage, when you analyze it, it's just going to be garbage. For example, if you ask your students, did you like this new method we used today? Your students are probably going to say, yes, we liked it, right? Because they want to please you. So you have to come up with another way to get maybe more reliable answers, so they're not just trying to please you. That's just an example. Again, then you go through data analysis, and you're taking the data apart, and you're trying to figure out, what is this saying? How do students feel about the use of Vietnamese and the use of English in the classroom? How do I feel about it? Do I have any new ideas about it, or how or why to use it? And then you repeat the process until you're satisfied. Action research must be published. That's part of it. It doesn't mean you have to publish it in a peer-reviewed journal, but it does mean you have to tell someone about it. You might be able to write it up in a newsletter, or maybe you're required to do some professional development. So you make a PowerPoint and at a conference, maybe you share what you learned. You know, research you must be able to duplicate it, to do it again. Someone else should be able to read your report and say, those are the methods. I'm going to do the exact same methods and see what, if I came up with the same thing, right? All right. So basically you go through these questions. You have to ask yourself with action research, what is the inquiry? That's kind of the bigger. I'm interested maybe in translanguaging, right? And why are you doing it? Well, to tell you the truth, many times you do action research because you have to. It's a top down. Maybe you have to do it because your teacher asks you to do it for a class, or your administration is asking you to do it as a whole school. But I think action research works best when it's not just top down, but when there's also some bottom up. For example, if you were asked to do something for professional development, and you chose action research, and you chose the question, and you chose how you're going to go about it, then you have more autonomy, and you're more motivated about it, and it will be more meaningful to you. So I like that it's both top down and bottom up, right? And then you're going to ask yourself, where will it take place? Well, it's probably going to take place in your classroom. Who will participate? Well, it's going to be your students and it's going to be you, right? How will you collect the data? I'm going to tell you a secret, the best kept secret. I tell this to my students. Try, when you're doing action research in your class, try to make as many of the data collection techniques and the way you're collecting data similar to what you would already do in the class, but you're going to just do it a little bit more systematically and rigorously. You're not going to do something totally new because that would take up a lot of time and teachers don't have a lot of time. So how will you collect the data? Well, I give them quizzes every week. Maybe when they line up, I'll say, those who think they spoke too much Vietnamese, line up on the right. Those who think they spoke too little on the left, something like that, right? And when will you collect data? Again, during the class, right? And who might benefit? Well, I think you would benefit because you might become a better teacher and your understanding of teaching and learning might be expanded. I think your students would benefit because their learning is getting better. And when you share the information, your school might benefit, your region, Vietnam could benefit. So a lot of people can benefit. So there's different types of action research. Just quickly, you can have action research for professional development. I just want to be better as a teacher. So I'm going to engage in action research to learn how I can improve. You also have something called exploratory action research. This is where a topic has not been researched much, and you're just exploring what happens when I do this, right? Right, okay, that's exploratory action research. Collaborative action research is when you collaborate, obviously, but it's often when you have maybe two groups of people. You might have a university professors coming in to a school, and then you might have volunteers, school teachers who join them, and together they engage in maybe exploring how translanguaging can impact student learning, right? There's also participatory action research. This type of research definitely has a social justice slant to it. And you're concerned about marginalized students or lack of access they might have, and you're working together with the community to improve a situation for them that they name. Classroom-based action research is limited to the classroom and on the classroom only, right? Where school-wide action research might be where a principal of the school asks that every class maybe engages in a similar activity, and you can talk about it and share what happens. So there's lots of types of different action research, as you can see. All right, just quickly, I want to talk a little bit about the difference between data collection, and data analysis. Because data are not the answers to your questions. The data is the raw material out of which responses to your questions will emerge. And you have to have an organized and sustained and well-managed process to gather the data. But then you have to have a process of drawing the responses out of that data, and that's called data analysis. Maybe when you're reading the students' journals, you're noting themes, and every time a certain theme, you might highlight it in one color, and another theme, another color, and you're saying, I'm seeing themes that are arising, right? Okay, so what are some data sources for translanguaging? If we did a study on translanguaging, well, you want to get at the students' opinions and their perceptions. That's in their head and you can't see it, right? You have to, how do you get at their opinions? Maybe when they kept a journal and tell you what they thought, right? That's one way to get at it. Another source, a data source, is actual what students, what they do, what languages they use, and how they code mix and code switch, and how they kind of have fun with language and play with language and creative with language, right? Those are actions. And then you want to look at students' progress in language development as well. Because again, we're looking at how does this improve, right? How does translanguaging improve student learning? Well, you have to measure student learning to see if that indeed takes place. You also want to think about the teacher. What are the teacher's opinions and perceptions? Thus the teacher's log. And you want to look at the teacher's pedagogical practices, what the teacher does, recording devices, or maybe lesson plans, all those things could be used. And you also want to look at the teacher's stance on identity, and policy, what they think about that. Again, that could be with a teacher's journal or a log. You could get at that. So there's some challenges to data collection. You have to always keep focus. Keep in mind what you're doing and why you're doing it as you collect data. You need to stick to your plan and you need to stick to your inquiry. You can make changes, but it needs to be done reasonably and systematically, okay? You can adjust your research question if necessary. Your area of inquiry often stays the same. It stays the same, but your question could be tweaked a little bit. You have to remember this. Less data well collected is more valuable than more data poorly collected. You don't want to collect a mountain of data that is haphazardly collected and not worth anything. And then what are you going to do with it? It's better to make sure that you collect it very systematically and then you and very well. And so less data well collected is much better than too much poorly collected. Okay, so our final section here, and that is, how do we do action research? Well, most teachers say, me, action research? That's not my job. It's not in my job description as a teacher, and how will I ever find the time to do action research on top of teaching and grading and all the other things I have to do? No way. Some teachers might say, I'm a teacher, I'm not a researcher, right? Research is for professionals in those white coats, and isn't it all about statistics? I don't know about statistics, I can't do that. And they might say, I don't have the support. I don't have the support of my administration or my peers. How would I ever get it done? But I want you to consider the benefits of action research. Action research can help you solve a very specific problem. Teachers like to solve problems if a student isn't learning, right? And this can help you do that. And you know what? It can help you grow professionally. I think you want to grow professionally. You don't want to get burnt out and just tired of teaching. Right? So it can help you improve your teaching to better meet the needs of students. That's kind of combining both of those things is a real benefit, right? And action research has worked before in Vietnam with positive results. There were 33 teachers who did 8 days of training. Lee Vong Khan has a study in 2018 where he showed when they had 8 days of training spread out over months, that these teachers actually improved and had some growth in their teaching and learning. Okay, so what would make it feasible? What would make it doable? What would you need? Well, I think you would need an attitude of saying, okay, it's going to take extra time. I'll make the time. What if I tweak what I already do in the classroom and use my grading and marking as part of data analysis? And you could acquire the knowledge and the skills. You don't need statistical analysis for most of action research, right? But if you see yourself as a teacher, researcher, a reflective practitioner, you're capable of creating knowledge and building theory, and you can get the basic skills of action research. And you can get support. What if you work with peers, with teaching learning communities, right? Teacher learning communities, and maybe you could get some release time from teaching a course from your administrator, or maybe you could get some type of encouragement from your school to engage in this. So what are some possible research questions you could do? Well, these are some questions. Maybe how, when, and why do I use Vietnamese in my English classes? And how do my students think about that? Do they think I use it too much? What do they think, right? Or you could ask, how can my use of L1 in my L2 classes be more strategic? In other words, more critical, intentional, reflective, creative, and better support learning. You can even make it more specific. And how can my use of translanguaging when I'm using graphic novels, right? That activity, how can it improve that? Or how can I learn more about my students' home languages and find ways to better support the formation of their cultural and linguistic identities? And how, when, and why do my students use L1 in the L2 classroom? And how do stakeholders feel about that? Me, my students, the parents, the administrators. And how can I encourage my students to reflect upon their language use in the classroom? And how does it impact their language learning and sense of identity. These are all action research questions that you could use. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit about area of inquiry versus research question. An area of inquiry is the larger topic, right? And then the research question can be tweaked, right, as the study unfolds. I think I mentioned that before. So this is really important, and it's data collection techniques. And I've mentioned these already. And if you're doing a study, you might use 6 or 7 of these, right? You could have journals or diaries, right, that the students keep that you collect maybe once a week. A teacher's log is essential of what you're doing and when and why you're doing it. Document collection. This could be just collecting their homework and collecting your lesson plans and keeping them in a very systematic way. Observation. You can be a participant observer. You're teaching in class, but you're also observing. So you just make time. Right after class, you write down as much as you can of what happened. Those would be your field notes. You can ask someone else to come in your room and take field notes, describe what's going on. You can actually record some of your interactions with students when you're going back and forth between languages and do an analysis of that. You can type out a transcription of that recording, and then you can use that transcription to help you reflect and think about what happened and why. You could write a survey and ask maybe what do teachers in the school feel about translanguaging, and you could do interviews. You could have discussions. These would be maybe face-to-face or online, right? And you could have something called stimulated recall. And that's where maybe you're watching a video together. You say, why did you do that? Why did you use English here and Vietnamese here? Or you can do that with the transcription as well. Okay, so tips for busy teachers, as I said before, make data collection part of what you would normally do, but do it more rigorously. And make data analysis, right, a more rigorous version of your marking. So I think I'm running out of time here as I'm looking at my clock. So I just have a couple more minutes, so I'm going to try to wrap this up. But when you plan your research, these are kind of the questions you want to ask yourself. What kind of data will respond to the question? What do I need to see? And what do I need to know in order to answer my research question? And on the right, I have some of the things that you might use. And then how will you go about collecting the data, right? Where and from whom? When and how often? What will you do with the data? These are questions you want to work out before you start. Now, again, you might start collecting the data and realize, oh, this is too much. I can't focus on both the teacher's use and the student use. So I will just focus on student use. That kind of thing can happen in the study. Well, I don't have time to go over the tips for researchers in TESOL because I want to allow some time for questions, but just really quick, I'll just show you. You want to have a tight focus and you want to make it feasible. So a narrower focus that's easier to do is really, really important. Don't take on too much, all right? Okay, then I'm gonna go quickly to the second tip. Choose a niche. That means a particular little cozy spot that you love, that you enjoy, and just start. You know, research can be demanding, but if it's something you love, maybe you'll keep at it, right? It's never too early to consider how you can start maybe even publishing. You don't start with publishing a journal article, but maybe writing for newsletters or volunteer for professional organizations like VietTESOL. Get to know people. Publishing is all about joining a professional community more so than just writing. So you need to get to know other professionals, and that's very important. Finally, go online and find resources. There is so much there. And oh, collaborate. Collaborating with mentors is just so important. I've done 3 co-edited books, and the collaboration with my co-editors was so life-giving. So I just really enjoy collaboration. Really quick, here's some selected books on translanguaging. There's so much out there right now. And here's a whole smattering of books on action research as well. All right, I'm going to end my presentation now. And can I stop screen sharing it and hand it back to my moderators for the question and answer?
Okay.
Hello? Stop share. Okay, sorry, there you go.
Hi.
Please.
Are there any questions so far?
So can you hear me now?
Yes.
Sure. Okay, thank you so much for your presentation. And I believe that you offer us a lot of valuable knowledge and experience in terms of languaging and how to use action research in Translanguaging to support our teachers and teaching practitioners. While we are waiting for some questions in the website, I have received some questions before that. So I'm very happy to share on the screen now. So can you see my screen now?
I can, yes.
Okay, so one of the first questions that I have received from our audience is that how can we weight the use of L1 and L2 in the L2 classroom environment in order to maximize the benefit of translanguaging? Are there any differences of students who have very different English language abilities, such as basic, intermediate, and advanced? So what are your opinions?
All right, yeah, leave the question up there so I can look at it as we go. So how do you weigh the use of L1 and L2 in the classroom? I think you need to ask yourself, and you need to ask your students, and you need to know what your administration thinks about all that. And you know, when I asked this question to Vietnamese teachers recently, the answers we got was it all depends, right? It all depends. That's always the answer, but it depends on, you know, the level of language. When you have very basic young students, you're going to be using more Vietnamese in the classroom, I believe. Someone thought that, oh, by the time we get into upper secondary, we don't need any Vietnamese, so we shouldn't have any translanguaging. But I don't think that's necessarily true. I think translanguaging can help in all contexts. Usually in upper secondary, you're dealing with writing, and writing is so difficult. So to be able to read complex texts in both Vietnamese and English, or maybe read it in Vietnamese and respond in English, or read it in English and respond in Vietnamese, this can be very supportive for students. So how can you weigh the use of L1 and L2 in the L2 classroom? I think it means you need to make that decision yourself by asking, what are the learning outcomes and how can I support my students, some of whom maybe whose English is very low and some whose English is very good. How can I be more flexible and creative in that? So you have to use action research to figure out that question, I think, but you need to be open to maybe many possibilities. And I'm learning from Vietnamese teachers that, you know, it really depends on, it might even depend on the level of the students and what you're teaching and how comfortable they are in it. And you have to also, what is the policy of the school? You can't ignore that, right? Okay, did I answer it? And are there any differences of students who are very different? Yes, you might have, in the same classroom, you might have really different levels, but you can use that to your advantage. Have those with higher levels help those with lower levels, right? So try to make lemonade out of lemons and figure out how that can be used to your advantage. All right.
Thank you very much. So the second question, as educators, how can we encourage L2 teachers in Vietnam to initiate their action research along their teaching careers?
You know, Zoltan Dornier has written many books about research and motivation, and I was lucky to have co-edited a book with him, and I got to know him very well. But he says, I have yet to meet a teacher who did action research on their own. In other words, many times action research is top down. And how do you, you know, encourage Vietnamese teachers to do action research? I think you can provide incentives. For example, if they have to engage in some type of professional development, make action research one of the possibilities. Or maybe create teacher learner communities in which they're reading about and conducting research, and they can meet with one another. Doing something together often is more beneficial than doing it alone. So I think trying to find resources, maybe even you could get a grant where you're going to do some type of action research, right? Can you find grant support? Can you get support from your supervisors? Can you get support maybe from VietTESOL, right? Maybe you say, I want to present next year at VietTESOL. So I want to find some other teachers who want to work on this, and we can do a project and then present on it, next year. So those are some ways. I wish you were here and I could see you and I could ask you what your ideas were, but you can email me and tell me that. Okay. So we can go to the next.
Okay, thank you for your suggestions. So the third question, in addition to the strength of L1 in the L2 learning environment, I'm wondering if there are any potential weaknesses in relation to the over-reliance on L1 in L2 classrooms.
And I think definitely there are. I did a really fun sabbatical where I got to travel to, I think, 7 different countries to see the students who graduated, and they taught in Vietnam. I went to Vietnam, I went to South Korea and China and Taiwan and Hong Kong. I went all over and I got to see them teaching. And I'll never forget, in South Korea, she taught an English class and she didn't speak one word of English. And I was like, what? How is that an English class? So obviously that's the overuse of it. It was the overuse of Korean. Did I say that right? She used all Korean in the English class. I didn't hear, yes, any English. So that's the overuse of it, right? So yes, any method, any idea can be used in the wrong way. So we need to be careful about that. So there are potential weaknesses indeed. And it's kind of difficult because you might have students who speak many different languages. I know maybe in Vietnam that might not be the case, but maybe here, like in Los Angeles, you could have 30 students, but there's 15 different languages in the classroom. And if they're speaking their languages, the teacher might not understand it. But again, that can be a positive, because if another student does, they can help translate, and it becomes this community where we're helping one another understand through all the languages that we have together. So yes, there are weaknesses in this. It's not a silver bullet, and it might not work in every situation. Good point.
Okay. The next one, in response to the real progressive problem solving with action research, what are any best practice on how to help L2 teachers who are very new to action research in order to maximize the use of L1, but still benefit L2 learners to a maximum extent?
So as my example, remember my example, you're tweaking it. So you're using action research on a particular, maybe you're researching a particular activity and you're asking, how can translanguaging maybe support learning, my students learning in this? And maybe you find out it didn't support learning. So I'm not going to use translanguaging in this particular activity. But again, translanguaging is just not a method and a gimmick. It's also kind of your stance in honoring students' identities. And I think that can be done regardless. So again, kind of hard to answer that, but as the action research unfolds, I think you'll find ways that work with you in your particular class with your particular students.
Okay, thank you. Another question that I have received from the chat box is that I am very interested in the vocal claim our students have the gift of bilingualism. Based on the expertise, what are any valuable messages that you would like to stress after this talk?
Oh, thank you for acknowledging that. Right, our students don't come as blank slates. They come with so many resources. So valuing that. And you said, what would you like to stress after this talk? I would say, oh, I didn't say this, so maybe I can say it now. So I'm an English language specialist working with the RELO, and we hope on December 5th to have a workshop to help small number of teachers, I don't know how many, I hope at least 30, perhaps explore ways of using action research in their classrooms, in their K-12 Vietnamese classrooms particularly. So if you're interested in that, maybe email me or let us know. I'm not quite sure. I don't think I'm in charge of selecting the teachers, obviously, but let us know about that because it's something that we want to explore. So that's something I'd like to thank you for asking me what I like to stress. And so I would say, but if you don't get that opportunity, find other opportunities to explore how translanguaging can support your students.
Okay, so
We're almost out of time.
Before the end of our presentation, I think the last question that we may have, I'm thinking about the response of the parents of young L2 learners. They think that once learning L2 should be entirely used with the L2 at the expense of L1. What do you think about this claim?
Yes, often in bilingual education, we have to do parent education as well. And I think it means sitting down with parents and trying to explain to them, show them the research that supports this, and say, we don't want to have children think that, oh, speaking Vietnamese is bad. We want them to be able to write academically in Vietnamese just as well as English and have them, support one another. So maybe it means having some time with the parents to try to explain the value of some of the strategies that you're using. Yeah. So good question. These are all good questions. Thank you so much.
Okay, so I think we have run out of time, and I don't want to interfere the audience in the next section. So on behalf of the VietTESOL International Convention, I would like to share our big thanks to your support and your dedication. And I wish you all of luck, and I hope to see you again in the future events of VietTESOL International Organization. So I wish on the audience for the rest of the day, which is very significant and meaningful. And thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
See you later. Bye-bye.
Yeah, there are also some unanswered questions on the website. So Dr. Mary Wong, you can go there to give the answers to the participants. Thank you.
Oh, okay.